we are on the cusp of spring to summer. Although, I mean, 3 weeks ago we were out in our bikinis, and then last week we were all bundled up with scarves and hats, and we just don't know what the weather's going to throw at us. But I think that we're going to have to take chances at this point and pretend that the summer is going to proceed normally, and it's not going to be below 55 at night anymore. And that's kind of our cutoff point. I know that people are from all over, so let's establish where we are here. We're in Philadelphia. We're solidly in zone 7, which means our average frost dates are somewhere between April 15th to May 1st is our last frost, although we blew that out of the water this year. And then usually our first frost on the other end is around Halloween. And that gives us a good solid 6 months of tropical growing season, and then anything else that we can do with cool season crops on either end of that. So if you are from another zone, you need to take the dates that I say with a grain of salt, because I might say it's time to plant tomatoes, and you've had yours in for 3 weeks and you've been fine. So please be patient with us zone 7 people, because we're right smack where we are, and there's nothing we can do about it because we're not moving right now. What does it mean when we go from the cusp of spring to summer? Well, there were a whole lot of crops that we talked about before that we planted as soon as the soil could be worked. That means that some of this stuff we got into the ground all the way back in March, some of it even in February. And we babied it along. Some of it we did outside, some of it we did in my beautiful hoop house, some of it in a cold frame, some of it just protected with row cover. But we got through our season, and now it's warm. And now it's pretty much warmer than 55 in the evening. And that means that we can safely say our soil is warm enough to put tomatoes in the ground. Hallelujah. So what happens now to the crops that we planted in the fall? Well, let's start with the really obvious stuff. Can you see this? This is my mustard, my simple mustard plant. And once it gets warm, boom, it goes to flower, it goes to seed. And I pretty much let it do that because it has become a perennial favorite in my greenhouse. What happens, and in my yard, right now it's flowering. These little guys here are the seed pods. They are not ripe yet because the flowers are still going, but this has all been pollinated. I have lots of different mustards, different sizes and colors. This one's sort of halfway between. I have some that are really dark purple and some that are really light green. This is smack in the middle. But what's happening is all of these are going to seed, and it will drop the seeds, and then this will be my ground cover in the winter. It does everything all by itself with no help from me, and then it gets nice, and I'm eating salads in February, in March, in April, and by May I'm pretty sick of mustard, and it's starting to get hot. So I'm going to take most of the mustard out of my beds. I'm going to leave a few to let them go to seed because they've been pollinated by a little bit of everybody. So there should be a nice genetic diversity in the seeds. But what am I doing with these? Well, what I really should do is I should be taking all the leaves off and either eating them in a salad, frying them up with eggs. But I need to be eating these, not just throwing them away. I can also blanch these and put them in the freezer for later. So in the meantime, what I'm doing is I'm taking the leaves off, and then I'm using these because they're just so beautiful. I'm going to let them go. What's another thing that's going to pot now? Oh, okay, my lettuce. My lettuce was beautiful, big, full, happy, but now it's done the bolting thing. Bolting means it's reached, this was a head of lettuce, and this is what a head of lettuce does when it gets too warm. It just does this. So what it's trying to do up here is it's going to put out flowers, and it's going to go to seed, and that's the end of my lettuce plant. This is what the lettuce plant wants to do. And this is, I mean, this is its happy senescence. It's going into retirement, and it's putting up this stem and doing all that. So what can I do in the meantime? Well, I can keep harvesting the bottom leaves and put them in a salad. I'm gonna have a big old salad here on my table by the time I'm done. But as they get taller and taller, because lettuce is one of those milky sap things, they start to get bitter and sappy. So I only eat the more tender leaves. That's going in a salad too. All right. What else do we have for our contestants today? More mustard, more lettuce. My bok choy, which I wasn't able to get on film, and I'm so unhappy about that, next week, is big and fat and fluffy and ready to just chop a bunch of them off and stir fry them. But I couldn't get them on camera. They were very, another thing I'm harvesting right now, and more lettuce, more lettuce, more lettuce, more lettuce. It's still pretty good. It's not as bitter as I had feared. Another thing that's going crazy right now is my mint. How many people have mint? Hand up. Guilty pleasures. Okay. I have probably only 5 different kinds of, I lied. Lettuce was bitter. This is one of my most vigorous crops right now. Not that I want it in my tomato bed, it's in my tomato bed. So what I'm doing is I'm cutting, and then I'm gonna dry that. I'm gonna hang it and dry it, and then I will have lots and lots of mint tea for the winter when you need it to warm your heart. It's, this is just regular old wild spearmint. I have chocolate mint, peppermint, pineapple mint, apple mint, and orange mint. All of those make really wonderful additions to teas, or make tea fine on their own.
Hey, Sally, quick question about mint. Is it a perennial or an annual?
It is a perennial. I mean, it will drop seeds, but mostly it spreads from the root. So it is, and it's a Keller perennial. So you don't want to put it, you want to put it in, oh, it's over there. Enjoy the train sounds. I just got a gift of some really sweet variegated something. Unidentifiable mint, and it's in where a mint belongs. It's in a container. Now I could put it in a big container and enjoy a whole lot of it, but right now it's in my tomato bed. Well, the mint thinks it's the mint bed, and it's feels like the tomatoes are interlopers. But the other thing that I can do with this is I can chop this up and put it in an ice cube tray with water, freeze it, and then pop the ice cubes out and keep them in a plastic bag. And then when I make iced tea, I just take a couple of those ice cubes and put them in my iced tea, and it adds a really nice flavor to it. Of course, I'm shaking this all over my phone. Let me move my phone. So what else is coming out? Okay. Guilty, guilty, guilty. This is my cauliflower that I didn't get planted. Now, seeing as the ground is now warm and the temperature at night is now 55 plus, I'm guessing that if I put my cauliflower in the ground now and apologize to it, it's still not going to forgive me. And it's just going to put up a spike and try to do what the mustard did. It's going to try to go to seed. It's not going to make me a big fat head. Broccoli, on the other hand, I could possibly get away with getting broccoli in the ground, but this is, I mean, it's pretty dry. It's pretty stressed. I'm guessing that this is probably a good candidate for the compost bin right now. So that's where that's going. Very sad, very guilty. Oh, the other mint, this mint that I just cut, I can also keep this in water in the kitchen and it will root, and I can give it to my friends because they'll think it's a wonderful thing, and I'll just laugh behind their backs when they put it into their tomato beds and it takes over the world. So, all right, enough of the mint. What are the other herbs that are going on right now? Rosemary is blooming its full head off. It's beautiful. So what can I do with the rosemary? I can use it like crazy. I can dry it. I can chop it up fresh and do the same thing, freeze it in ice cubes. But my favorite new thing is we got the grill out this weekend. Of course, we realized we didn't clean it last fall, so we didn't end up using it. But it's on my list. It's on my list. I'm gonna clean the grill because I am thinking about shish kebabs. And I have seen where somebody took a long piece of rosemary off of the big old woody plant and used that as the stick for the shish kebab, because then you've got potatoes and onions and whatever meats you decide to use infused with the taste of the rosemary. So I'm just like, I'm ready for that. So that's
Sally, before we move off the topic of herbs, people are wondering, if you have herbs that are flowering, should you pick off the flowers to keep it producing? The same for like arugula and lettuces and things. What should we be doing with flowering produce right now?
It depends on what which herbs that are flowering. If it's something like dill, then you just you use the weed, you use the leaves, use the flowers, you wait until it gets seeds, and then and then you use the seeds. But what it's saying is it's not going to be bushy. It's trying to do this because that's the nature of the plant. Most plants, their idea of fun in the summer is we leaf out, we stem, we flower, we go to seed, we get fruit, and then we go by. And that's what the plant wants to do. And what we have to do is we just sort of get, we distract it from doing those things by pinching and doing those things. So the person that asked about the herbs, what herbs in particular are flowering that you want to know about pinching?
Someone's asking about
chives. Oh my God. The joy of chives is the flower. As far as I'm concerned, you take those flowers and you put them in a little vinegar, and it makes the vinegar very, very faintly pink. And it infuses the vinegar with the taste of the chives, and it makes a really wonderful salad dressing, or a really wonderful flavoring over ice with a little chive vinegar, a little in water, and a little bit of mint. So I'm getting into drinking all of these things because I'm home and they're here and they're free. So why not?
What about thyme and sage?
Thyme and sage, if they want to flower, God bless them. Because both thyme and sage, you can continue to use the leaves. It's not going to do just the flower and then die. Both of those are perennial herbs, so they will keep pumping out the leaves and the flowers. So the same thing with the flowers from the thyme and the flowers from the sage. You can put them in a salad dressing, or I at this point I throw anything into soup, so that all goes into soup as well, because it's a flavoring. It's a great flavoring, and they have nothing else to do right now. So let them flower and use them up. All right. What was another thing that? Oh, I planted a bunch of spinach. I have spinach that I planted in the fall, and then I have spinach that I planted in March. It has all gone the way of the lettuce. It's put up a big spike. Let me see if I can grab one. Let me step off camera a second. This is what spinach does when it's done. So this little spinach is what this guy looked like in the spring. And now what this spinach has done is it's gone off and it's made flowers. They're kind of, don't have much of a smell, but this whole greenhouse is full of pollen, and I'll be sneezing later. But this is all spinach seed, and if I let this go, this would make seeds, and I would be able to save my seeds and reuse my seeds. But as it is, what I've been doing is picking off the leaves that are still green and continuing to eat them because they're still sweet. They don't get a bitterness to them. But what I did in the meantime was I planted more spinach. So this was planted maybe a month ago. So this is, and it's already, because some of it is, it doesn't like the heat. It's one of those cool season crops. You can see this is trying to do the spinach, is trying to do the same thing that that big guy just did. So I will just keep clipping these and eating these and clipping these and eating these. And I will try to plant a few more, but I'll plant them in a shady space where they don't get direct sun, so that they can stay a little bit cooler than the main garden, which is in 3/4 sun. So that maybe I can avoid, well, someone pooped on that. I don't know who, somebody little. I'm gonna eat that one. So I will just keep trying, that's called succession planting, and I'll just keep trying to plant more of that and hoping that I still get some to eat. Now, because it's going into the heat of the summer and all of these spring crops are kind of crapping out, I'm going to the other things that I can eat the greens of, like Swiss chard. Actually, basil, I'm planting basil because basil, when you have just a few little plants, it's almost a sacred thing. You have a little bit and you put a pinch in something, and by the end of the summer, you are like pulling whole chunks off the plants and slapping them on a burger because you're eating them as a green rather than as a flavoring because you have so much of it. So I'm looking for other greens that will leaf out during the summer and not be so sensitive to the heat. And the spinach is, the spinach, this is.
My fear, Sally, is that you're going to turn around, spit it out, and tell us it was also too bitter.
That lettuce, it was great. I'm tasting the lettuce, and then all of a sudden, the edges of my tongue started to turn up. It was like, no, this is still pretty good.
Sally, I've got a ton of questions about spinach for you.
All right, lay them on me.
Okay. So Kelly is asking about troubleshooting, that they planted their spinach back in March and it feels like it's taking a really long time for it to get anywhere. Do you have any suggestions for them?
Well, by get anywhere, you mean, did it come up at all? I hope so. And it's, I'm trying to remember when I planted this. This was one of the earliest. This has been at least a month, and it took a month to get this big. And it was a month when it was warmer, so it would have grown a lot faster. We had some really crazy weather in March. So I would not be surprised if it now caught up and instantly bolted. So my suggestion with all of those things is give yourself some insurance. Plant it in March, then plant it in early April, and then plant it in mid-April, and then plant it at the end of April, and plant it in the middle of May. Because somewhere in there, you're going to hit the sweet spot. Of course, if all you've got is a space this big, I'm sorry, we do the best that we can. Wait, she said it did get a little bit boggy, but you fixed the drainage. So give it some, be patient and give it a little more time.
I think Matt was asking, how soon can you plant seeds that you saved from your spinach?
You don't want to plant them right now because you're going to have them in the middle of the heat of the summer. So you might want to plant that same spinach seed maybe end of August into September when the days start getting shorter. It's still warm, but again, spread them out. Do them, mid-August, end of August, mid-September, end of September. The last spinach that I plant, and that's the spinach that has now gotten, this guy, let's see, I'm 5'4", so I would say 5'4". I planted that October the 10th. So I planted a lot of my greens in October to ensure that I had some wintertime salads.
Is a solution for it being too warm out right now to plant your spinach indoors? Like if you wanted to continue getting greens?
But it won't, it's something that likes a lot of light, even though it doesn't like a lot of heat, but why not? I grew a lot of lettuce and spinaches in my bedroom a couple of years ago in a window box. And it got stringy, but it was still good to eat. So Try it.
All right, and then I know you have this on the table, so it might be a good segue, but Maria is wondering if you could talk a little bit about rhubarb.
Oh, I want to talk a little bit about rhubarb. Okay, this is a wonderful thing. Rhubarb is a wonderful thing, and but it seems I have some really, you can't see them because I can't get close enough, but I have some really interesting bugs on it. Worms, translucent orange worms. You can see right into their bellies. But anyway, there are not many pests that will bother a rhubarb. And a rhubarb is a perennial, so that you plant it once and you have it for the rest of, hopefully for the rest of your life. I brought some into the greenhouse. Now, let me explain my greenhouse for people who think I've got a fancy greenhouse. This is really just a hoop house, and it's totally passive. We finally put electricity in it last week, so I can run my computer from here. So not only do I have electricity, but, oh, he left. Stanley is somewhere. But Stanley ran me an Ethernet cable. So I have electricity and an Ethernet cable in my hoop house. But other than that, there are no fans, there's no heat, there's no anything. But this time of year, it gets mighty, and then on into summer, it gets really, really hot in here. So it's going to be interesting to see if the rhubarb that I brought in here is able to handle the heat. But generally, rhubarb is something you prepare a bed and you stick it in, and then you feed it compost every year. And other than that, you don't do anything except pick it and eat it. Now, when you pick it, you pick it all the way at the bottom. Don't pull, cut, because if you pull, you're liable to pull all of the roots up out of the ground, and then you say bye-bye to your plant, which is not, it's sad. But you don't eat the leaf. You just eat this part, and you compost this part, or you lay this down as mulch, or you take pictures of the interesting caterpillar. That's what pooped earlier. Okay, I recognize that poop now. All right, so that's compost, and this will be crumble. That means it's going to get equal parts butter and sugar and oatmeal, chopped up and then baked. I have to put it somewhere safe because I'll forget it otherwise.
I've
So
got some.
somebody had asked, I wanted to move on to sweet potatoes, squash, and tomatoes because I saw there were a couple of tomato questions.
We also have some rhubarb questions.
Oh, we have
move
more
on.
rhubarb questions.
All right. So Fern is asking about rhubarb in its third year in a 14-inch pot, small yield, recommendations, ?
Let it out of the box. Rhubarb likes to be in a 14-inch box. Let's see. That's this big. It's not big enough. It's big enough for one plant. And what good does one plant do you? It will make you one little tiny cup of rhubarb crumble. So if you can get it into a bigger box or get it into the ground, it's worth giving up the space. Actually think about it, because you're going to get a 2-week, 3-week harvest out of it, and then it's going to take up that space for the rest of the. So what I do is I interplant in my community garden in Olney. I'm a member of Roots Garden, and I have a 4x8 plot there, and it has been rhubarb there for the last 10 years. But what I do is I harvest from one side. So I chop off everything on one side of the bed, and then I plant sweet potatoes. So the sweet potatoes vine, and they go everywhere. And then later I'll go, I push all the rhubarb to the other side, and it seems to go where it's told. And then the next time I harvest, I'll harvest from the other side. And then I'll plant whatever. So I plant herbs over there or flowers. And then I'll harvest out of the middle. But you don't want to harvest past, say, I'm guessing I should probably harvest a lot in the next 2 weeks and then leave it alone. But I do something that they don't tell you to do. Imagine that, me. My sister's out there, she's laughing. I right before it frosts, I go out and cut it all down to the ground because it's going to die anyway, and it's a terrible waste. And it's pretty much, you want to leave leaves on it because they're the photosynthesis for the plant, and they're the ones that are pulling in the sunlight and converting it to sugar and sending it down into the roots so that we've got roots for next year. And you don't want to cut the leaves off because it's doing that. But on about the week before you're expecting frost, it's not going to do a whole lot more photosynthesizing for that. So I go out and then I get one last treat out of it. I'll get one last pie or something out of it for Thanksgiving, which is a wonderful surprise.
I love that your metric of success here is just like how many desserts can you make out of this?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
And then one last question about rhubarb before you talk about something else. Diana's wondering about the flowers. Can you use rhubarb flowers for anything?
They're an interesting flower. They're kind of, I don't have, wait a minute, please. I'm stepping off camera. Hi, Jamie. Well, guess what? I have company. Come here. Come here. Come here. Oh, he says no. Here. Say hi to everybody. Say hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Can you see? Say hi. You've been mosquitoed, haven't you? Mwah. I love you. So, this looks a lot like spinach, and it's oddly enough in the same family. It's in the dock family. So the flowers are kind of insignificant. And then when it gets seeds on it, they're sort of, it's in the dock family. So they all look like not exciting, but you can save the seeds and start new plants, but it's going to take you 4 years down the line before you get any significant yield out of them. So, I mean, if you like the flowers, then cut them off and put them, there is nothing to stop you from cutting tomato plants and everything else and putting them in a big vase on your table because it's for you. So, any more rhubarb questions?
We're in the clear with rhubarb.
We're in the clear with the rhubarb. Okay, I'm moving on to squash, and I promise, yes, Patty, we will get back to tomatoes. These are sad because they need water, and I want to say a little bit about transplants. I have these transplants that are ready to go in the ground. I'm getting this whole lot of sign language, and I have no idea what you're saying.
Show your stuff from across the street.
Okay.
I've been trying to tell somebody that.
Oh, okay. You can show my stuff from across the street. Oh, my God. Stanley got the remote picture to work. Okay. So what time is it? La, 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 la. No, okay, it's 4, we got plenty of time. That would be exciting.
I can hear you.
Okay. He can hear me.
Point to.
Oh, okay.
Cassidy can tell you whether you can see my picture.
Can you see Stanley?
No, see you. I'm aiming the camera at you.
Can you see me on under Stanley's name? Find Stanley on this chart and see if you can see.
I can.
You can see him?
No, I can see you.
Okay. She says yes. Yes, that means.
I can go across the street. I've been just there trying to wave at people. Hello. I can show you.
All right. So what Stanley's going to do is Stanley's going to go across the street and he's going to lift the cover from one of the beds and show us what's in the bed. Because that's what I wanted to do first today. So go for it. And I don't know how you're going to let me know. Cassidy's going to watch for him because I can't. So anyway, I have these wonderful, wonderful plants and I have let them get seriously stressed out. They are dry. And what will happen with these is exactly the same thing as happens with all the other stuff that gets stressed out. When it gets stressed out, it says, oh my God, I better have children and finish and retire to Florida. So if I don't get this in the ground and happy really, really fast, it's going to start putting out flowers right here on this tiny little plant because it's screaming. Senescence is the word for it. It's screaming that it wants to quickly mature, have children, and bail. And we don't want it to do that. We want it to get big and fluffy before it has children and bails. So don't do what I do. Oh my goodness. Pollen is a wonderful thing. So I want to get my squash into the ground, but I want to get my squash into the ground quickly, and I want to get it covered by a screen or row cover because the squash vine borer will come in and lay eggs on it, and the eggs will hatch, the caterpillars will hollow out the inside of the stem, and the whole thing will die. Also, squash bugs will fly in. They're like stink bugs, and cover the plant and suck the juices from the plant. So what I really want to do is I want to get them in, get them happy in the ground, and get them covered. So what can I cover them with? When Stanley gets there, we'll show you what hoops and row cover look like. Moving on to tomatoes. I have my beautiful tomatoes. And the question is, if you have seeds, which I just happen to have, which I haven't planted yet, I am gonna plant my seeds right in the ground. And I'm betting that I will get tomatoes. I'm gonna make the soil very soft, no big chunks, because those are little baby seeds. And I'm gonna plant 2 or 3 to a hole, and water the soil, plant the seeds, and cover them gently. Don't put them in the ground and then water, because you'll wash them away. So I'm just going to put them there, and I'm going to walk away, and miraculously they're going to come up, and I'm going to decide which of the 3 is the best, and I'm going to pinch off the other, yank, and pinch them off and go with one, and let my tomatoes grow. And alongside, I'm going to, for inspiration, I'm going to put in a tomato that I already have from plant, and I'm going to let them figure out who's going to get the fruit first. I will probably get fruit a couple weeks sooner, but will I get fruit out of them? Absolutely. And those will last longer into the season. So if I took and planted like a brandywine in the ground and a brandywine seed in the ground, I will probably get the same amount of tomatoes in the same range of time, but these will come in a little sooner and those will last a little longer. Did that make any sense? Everybody nod, okay? All right. And we were supposed to start out in the garden, so you could actually see this with me. But what we're seeing is it's a raised bed, but it's only raised by being hilled up. It's not got wood or stones or anything. It's just hilled up. And what I planted down the middle, that plant that you see right smack in the middle, is a collard green. So collards are my major plant. But what I've done, ooh, look, we got a close up on the collard. And so I'm expecting for them to stay through the summer. But the rest of the stuff in here is early season. So I have just interspersed onions and kale. And then I seeded spinach and beets. And what you're seeing is the spinach edge of the bed, so that the ground is absolutely covered with spinach. So I'll be harvesting the spinach until that bolts. And meanwhile, the collards that are in the middle and the kale will be getting bigger, and I'll be harvesting the kale until it bolts. And hopefully the collards will stay in there and hang in there for the whole summer. Now, Stanley, if you would go a little bit to the right, just okay. Turn to the right. You can catch the big fat bok choy there somewhere.
All right. It's a little bit further up, and there's still some stuff in the way.
Oh no, and it's really precarious there. So we're hoping that he didn't fall on his head, because well, Stanley, we've lost you.
All right.
The question there, 2 questions quick while we're waiting for him to recover, is that the question is that screening or the row cover that's right in front of, oh, there we go. Okay. All right, there's our bok choy. That's just the star of the show. And that is going to be dinner tonight. And it's not going to be a dessert, but it's going to be dinner. So we have 3 of them that are big enough to harvest. That's a little tiny there. It was so tiny. No, that's okay. That guy right there. I'm so proud of that. So that is netting. It's insect netting. It's not, some of the beds are going to be covered with row cover, which I can show you when I'm back to being the star. But that is netting, and it's pretty much to keep the bugs out. It was not used as an insulation to keep the plants warm, because I didn't need, none of those plants needed to be kept warm. They don't care. So what I'm trying to do is to keep those really pretty white butterflies out of there, because those are the ones that go flit, flit, flit from plant to plant. And every time they land, they have, they drop an egg, and that egg turns into a green worm, which eventually gets to be 1.5 inches long and eats your plants. And I'm keeping the insects away rather than dealing with the insects once I have them. Now the question came up, what is the soil that if I'm filling raised beds, what kind of soil do I like? I go the opposite way of what Cassidy said. Cassidy likes more topsoil and less compost, and I like it the other way because compost is so much easier to get. So I go with maybe 30% topsoil and 70% compost the first year. And then every year thereafter, I just add more compost. Cassidy goes heavier on the topsoil, but then she has to add a whole lot more compost over the coming years than I do, which is not going to hurt. Okay, now we're going over, this is the lettuce bed, which is also covered by this same netting. And I wasn't trying, I don't have insects that particularly go after the lettuce. Slugs do, and they don't care. They'll find a way under the netting. But I'm still trying to confuse Mr. Groundhog. And so probably what's going to happen is I will pray that Mr. Groundhog doesn't figure out how to get through this netting. I'll take the middle row of lettuce, right down the middle of the bed, that will be salad for the next few weeks or the next few days. And then I will put my squash plants in there in that same bed, so that as the squash plants are getting bigger, I'm continuing to eat the lettuce, and the cover is already there to keep the bugs from getting on my squash. So that's my lettuce. I'm very proud of it. It's been planted a month. And they were teeny tiny little babies, and now they're big and fluffy and enough to share with the neighbors. So what else? Stanley, can you now turn around behind you and show us the potato bed? The netting is called netting. It's just called insect netting, and you can buy it from the garden center, folded up, in sheets, and then you spread it over the hoops, or you can buy it in big rolls from the garden supply place. Okay, so what is directly behind Stanley now is a lot more baby bok choys, which have come in nicely. That is a cool season crop, and as soon as it gets hot, it's going to start trying to bolt and put up a stem and seed. So I am planting that every time I plant anything, I plant a few more bok choys, because we pick them small and then they make a really good stir fry. Again, not a dessert, Cassidy, but still good to eat. They're good raw, and they're good as a stir fry. But this bed, 1/2 of it is the bok choy is the big leaf stuff in the front, and then behind it is peas, and the peas are coming up, and I'm hoping that they hurry it along. It's now too late to plant new peas, so if you're going to be planting anything like that now, you're going to be planting beans instead. The peas like cool soil, and they will not do well if you start planting them in a warm soil. But they should continue to grow, and I should get some nice peas out of them. I just wish that they would hurry up. They took forever to come up. So those are my peas, and that's a weed in the middle, I guess. Now, Stanley, can you go now toward the bed where you were near where your chair was. So the last bed, the corner bed. Is that the corner bed? And I've been calling them peas and they're really potatoes. Can you, oh my God, I'm embarrassed. I was in the wrong bed. Those are potatoes. And I planted them. They were the very first bed I planted. I planted them the first week of April and they came up beautifully. I had some fridge potatoes because I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to get potatoes. And so I planted the ones out of the fridge. And then I was able to find more potatoes that were actually certified to use for planting because they were certified virus free. And then I was at Whole Foods and I saw this this bag of mixed purple, red, and white potatoes, and they were $2.99 a pound, and I couldn't resist. And I planted those. So we're going to see how that works out. But the problem was the purple potatoes came up and then we got that brutally cold night and the darn things froze. And I could not, I have never, ever seen potato plants freeze. So if I had thought ahead and really believed that it was going to be 30 something, I would have gone and thrown more mulch or hay or something on top of them to protect them. But whoever would think that potatoes needed protecting? Well, now we know that. Okay, I think we're good. So back to, let's talk about this netting, because I saw a bunch of questions go by about the netting. The netting, what is better? Is it netting that's better, or is it, how do I unpin? Oh, we just unpinned him. There's Cassidy, she's been pinned now. This is, I'm gonna hold it up. This is, see me? I'm very cloudy. This is what, when everybody was all of a sudden making masks and they were saying you should line your mask with interfacing. And I'm thinking, who the heck knows what interfacing is? If you didn't take home ec when you were, you know, now that you're 65 and you took home ec when you were 10 and 15, you knew what interfacing was. But then I looked and I said, this is exactly what interfacing is, only thinner. This is row cover, and it's a felt. It's a pressed fabric rather than a woven fabric. And it is, the thing about it is it lets light through. It lets, I'm not going to spit on it. It lets, trust me, it lets water through. It lets air through, but it helps to insulate. So when you are planting things early on, or I ran out and I threw this over my tomatoes, my tomato flats when it got chilly that night, not the 30-degree night that I killed my tomatoes that night. But this is a nice insulation. The netting is not insulation. The netting is more to keep the insects out. And I at this point probably would opt for the netting instead. The question is, how do you mound? Do you have to mound soil on your potato plants? All right, the potatoes and sweet potatoes are different. This is a sweet potato, and the sweet potato is a part of the root of the plant. A regular potato, which I don't have because I stuck my hand in to pull one good of science and stuck my hand right into an anthill. So that was not fun. So the potato stayed in the ground. Potatoes are really part of the stem. So what you want to do is you want to plant the potato deep, and then so I dug a trench and I put the potatoes in, and then I covered them with about 4 inches of soil, and then they came up through the soil, and once they got a little bit bigger, I will put 4 more inches of soil on it and make it constantly struggle to get to the top. And then once it's about this deep, then I'm going to leave it alone and let it do the whole big plants and then photosynthesis and all of that stuff, because all along the stem is where more potatoes will form. So the more stem I have below the surface of the soil, the more potatoes I will get. Now, I'm using, I did a trench, and then I put light soil on top. And now instead I'm piling compost, which is very heavy, heavily, almost like hay in it. It's actually, it's bamboo compost. And so, because there are bamboo plants near me. So it's very light and fluffy, and I'll just keep piling that on top, because then instead of having to dig down, I'll be able to peel away the covering on the potatoes when it's time to harvest them, and just pick the potatoes like fruit instead of digging them like bulbs. Do I interplant potatoes with anything? No. Potatoes they just pretty much fill I put, of course, bok choy around the edges of the bed because I'm using the real estate twice. I've got the potatoes, but while I'm waiting for them to get bigger, my bok choy, I can have that in and out in a month to 6 weeks and have that, that's my go-to plant for filling space. The lettuce timing. Can you plant lettuce now? Well, you can, and that's what you're going to put in your shady space. But know that it's not going to last very long, and it is going to bolt. So you're going to look for varieties that, like spinach slow bolt, or there are having the name that to specifically say that they're slow to bolt. So those are the guys that you want to plant now. But know that they don't like the heat, and if you let them wilt once, they are done. So you're going to have to very carefully monitor your lettuce. Is arugula already done for the season? Well, my arugula, except for the color of the flowers, is just almost as tall as the mustard. So I think that arugula is done for the season. But again, if you plant it in a cool, shady space, you will get some. But it will constantly try to bolt. And what you do is you eat the flowers. I mean, you learn to eat all of it because it's there. Let's see. Those are the newest questions. Let's get back to the old questions. What are the important questions that I have missed, Cassidy, since you are like the monitor, the hall monitor, question monitor?
Did you talk about interplanting potatoes?
Interplanting potatoes. More what I would do with potatoes is not interplant potatoes, but I would stagger my plantings so that I would plant. Now, you have to plant, if you're Irish, you're supposed to plant a potato on March the 17th. And I did get some potatoes planted on March the 16th. And they're doing okay, although they have an anthill on top of them. But what I want to do, I love new potatoes, those little bitty baby ones, not the big, but the tiny little ones that are smaller than an egg. And so what I will do is I will plant a second or even a third crop of potatoes later. So I might plant some now, and then I plant some maybe in a couple more weeks, so that I have the long season potatoes. They're going to get big, and those are the ones that I'm going to try to store for the winter. I need to learn how to do this. I've never stored potatoes for the winter. Sweet potatoes, yes. The regular potatoes, not. So that's going to be a new challenge for me. But the second and third crop are going to be strictly for those little baby potatoes.
Young Mai's asking about summer greens. What do you recommend for summer?
Summer greens, my summer greens are trying to plant more. What I found is that new mustards are coming up. So my mustards will try to come up and they will try to bolt, but I'll keep eating mustards. Sweet potato greens are now are edible. They are better cooked than raw, but sweet potato greens are edible. I eat collard leaves. They're hot. I mean, they're much better. Collards are much better if they've frosted first. But I will continue to pick the smaller leaves off of the broccoli that's bolted, the mustard that's bolted that I didn't get, the new mustard that comes up. Swiss chard is a nice green. It's not as good raw. And then, like I said, I eat the basil leaves as a, I'm trying to think of what else is there in there. We're getting a stock now of mustard, garlic mustard, which is a weed, a terrible weed. But, and right now most of it has bolted and has white flowers on it. So if you've ever, it's got a perfectly round leaf and it has right now a white flower and it's about this tall. So if you have that, that's pretty good. Cut it off, and then the new stuff coming up is bigger, rounder leaves. And I bring my Bryson beans outside, and then I'll pick a leaf off the mustard, garlic mustard, and wrap it up and eat it that way. So there are lots of things that you can continue to eat. It's just you get used to the bitterness of them, because in the summer the greens have a much stronger taste. There isn't a whole lot out there that has a mild taste in the summer. You are muted.
Yeah, I realized. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Anyways, I was trying to say we have to give the people what they want, and we have to talk about pest control in the garden, specifically with squirrels and deer.
Okay, squirrels and deer. I invited my lovely daughter, who has 2 really lovely pit bulls, over for them to pee everywhere in the yard for an entire day and night, so that the deer know that I have, that there are carnivores here. My issue is less squirrels and more groundhogs, because the squirrels do a lot of digging. They have dug up all of my beets. They have planted acorns in all of my pots. They planted peanuts in Shauna's window box. They are just, inveterate planters of stupid things that they never come back for, but because their brains are only this big. So, but are there any magical cures for deer and squirrels? And I don't have a good answer. I mean, the folks that I recognize, most of us are city people, so air guns are not an okay thing. I wish I had a good answer. I could just say, just do this and boom, no problem, but that's not happening. We have deer on 10th Street. Yeah, there are 2 of them. They wander up and they eat people's hostas. I know that my sister has warred with them for years, and big, tall netting. Nod and tell me if that's, yeah, she has like 8-foot tall netting that's floppy, and they don't seem to like that, so they don't jump over it. I've seen them go over a rigid fence, a 6-foot fence, just jump from a dead standstill, jump over it. So if anybody comes up with a good answer for that, I will be glad to broadcast. Okay, here's what Mike McGrath says. Mike McGrath from You Bet Your Garden. He says that what you do is you go and you eat a big steak, and you do what I did with the dogs. You go around the yard and you pee in all the strategic places, because deer are very perceptive in that they will smell that a carnivore is there. And as long as you can get somebody to keep eating steak and peeing in your yard, they would sooner go to someone else's yard where no one is. I would sooner go to someone else's yard where no one is peeing as well. But we do what we can to save our gardens. So no good answer for that. Can I plant Swiss chard and bok choy seeds now, or is it too late? Go for it. Can you plant arugula now? Go for it. Can you plant squirrels now? Yeah, go for it. Do we have rabbits? Rabbits can be, are less persistent than groundhogs about digging under a fence or going over a fence. Rabbits will tunnel, but rabbits can be discouraged from tunneling. Groundhogs, their brains are not wired for that. And so I have seen people bury fencing down a foot so that the groundhog wouldn't go under it, and put up fencing. And I have seen those suckers climb a tree and jump in to a garden. So we just have to persist, and we have to spend more time in our gardens at times when they would rather be there.
Marlene's wondering if the dog trick also works for groundhogs.
It would be more effective if the dogs were there when the groundhog came to visit. But we're trying it. It's experimental, and it didn't cost me anything except, you know, I have to watch where I walk. But other than that, we'll report back. So other people, let's do some research here and get.
What about voles and mice? How to get rid of them?
Voles and mice. Well, here's where it's like, I have less issues with squirrels because there are so many cats in my neighborhood. I have very few problems with mice and voles because there are so many cats in my neighborhood. But what I do have problems with is there are so many cats in my neighborhood. And anytime I dig something and a bed is nicely dug, they take that as an open invitation to also dig and poop. So what I will take the cats over all of those other things, and then I will deal with the cats by when I newly dig something, I lay fencing over it, or I lay I laid tomato cages sideways to keep the cats confused from digging because the tomato cages let the light through, but the cats didn't like to dig around them. What's good to plant with okra? Ooh, shrimp. Now I'm thinking about gumbo. Okra. I have never planted anything with okra, and okra is one of the favorite things of groundhogs. Okra and sweet potatoes are the absolute favorite foods of groundhogs. They will like forgo lettuce and cabbage and all those other things to go for the okra. So I have had to plant I'm going to step out of the screen. I'm going to show you. Well, actually, it has nothing to do with okra. It has to do with groundhogs. So okra, I just plant beds of okra. And of course, you can plant bok choy around it because it's a tall plant, and anything that's low. I haven't had okra grow up in beds with where there was mint, and the mint didn't seem to discourage it from growing. And one of those plants that you want to plant, I plant it in a flower bed because it is so beautiful, and then I eat the little baby okras before they get very big. But it's another plant that you like to stagger the plantings, plant, and then a month later plant more, so that you've got them spread out over the season. Escarole for the fall, yeah, you plant that mid to end of September. Because it likes the cooler weather. Can we talk about spider mites? Ew, why? Spider mites really, really like plants that are already stressed. So they will especially get on plants when it's hot, and dry, because they like hot and dry, and they'll be on the undersides of your eggplants and your tomatoes and what else do they get on? Eggplants and tomatoes, mostly eggplants. And they get on some of my house plants when they're outside, when they're stressed. So, I mean, if there were spider mites around, they would be on these poor little stressed, actually I have aphids on these, because the bugs like to take advantage of plants that are already stressed. What can you do about spider mites? Well, it is Safer Soap for sucking insects, neem for chewing insects. Those are the two organic go-tos. So spider mites are sucking insects, so Safer Soap. But easier is to keep the plants, when you water the plants from below. If you're using a hose, squirt it up into the plants from below, because they really don't like when the undersides they like to be on the undersides because they're protected from rain. They don't like the moisture. So if you can get them wet from below, go for it. And safer soap. What eats ripe tomatoes? Something takes one bite out of tomatoes and tosses them away, and that's those freaking squirrels. Unless it's you've got a neighbor that's got a penchant for like and I'm told that the reason that they do that is they don't particularly like tomatoes, but they're thirsty and they know they're juicy. So they not just take a bite out of the tomatoes, but they suck juice out of the tomatoes. So that I just have this vision of little squirrels all lined up sucking on cherry tomatoes, but that's probably not helpful in the horticultural world. Voles and mice. When I harvest my lettuce and I put squash in the spot, do I add more compost? I always add more compost. And one of these weeks we need to talk about worm farms, because I have a worm farm, and that is where I get major fertilizer from. I feed my garbage to the worms. My worms eat my garbage, and they produce this wonderful poop stuff that is either in juice form, which I dilute. I take a cup of it, I throw it in a watering can, and 2-gallon watering can, and I water with it. Or I take a handful of it, minus the worms, and I throw it in the bottom of the watering can, and I shake it up and I water with it. Because it introduces not just a lot of nutrients and a lot of micronutrients, but it also introduces a lot of the right kind of biology to make your soil really pop. And that's what I want. That because those little chompers are breaking down my compost, and all of that compost that I'm adding is now in such nice small pieces that it's breaking up the clay from the topsoil and the existing soil, and it is working the nutrients all through the soil. So we'll talk later about worm farms, but that's what I like to use, even more than a handful of compost in each hole. But then I water with the worm compost tea.
Kelly's saying that they've been considering a worm farm, which I feel like both of us would say just do it already.
Just do it already, yeah.
But also keeping it somewhere that's cool. So like your basement, or Sally, do you keep yours in your garage? Where you keep yours?
I don't have a garage. You made me sad.
Sorry.
I have one bin is outside in the yard, and the other one is down in the basement. And right now, this time of year, they really don't care where they are. And I get other interesting flies in the basement that come out of it, and then I get these other interesting bugs. They're all part of the process. So no one has complained yet because they haven't figured out that that's where the flies are coming from. Do we need to cover pumpkins and watermelons with the cover? Pumpkins and watermelons don't seem to get as many. Pumpkins do get squash bugs on them, but not to the extent that like zucchinis and summer squash get them. I'm banking, and we're going to knock wood on this one. I'm banking on that row cover, keeping the groundhog distracted and out. So I'm covering everything with that stuff this year. But I really can't think of any particular bug that gets on watermelons or pumpkins. All right, there's a bunch of questions about composting. Can I point anybody toward resources about starting a good compost pile? Yeah, sure. And I can probably follow up with a couple of links about that. The secret of compost is you want to have let me see if I can get the proportions right. And Cassidy, you know this better than me, I bet. 2/3 of carbon and 1/3 nitrogen. So that means you want, I use my household garbage, but, and that's my nitrogen source because it's slimy and soft and lush. And then I cut that with chopped up leaves from my yard. So I and sticks and wood chips and whatever I can get that's more carbon. And I put that in. You know what? My brain is starting to get dead. So I'm not going to tell you the whole story of compost. Let's do a whole class about compost where we can actually start a bin and build one and see all of the different stuff that goes with it. But just to know, yes, you can start a compost bin, but if all you have is a little bit of space and no knowledge, a worm bin is a more fun thing and much more interesting. Any tips to grow and care for bottle gourds? No. That you treat them like squash. Only it's best if you get them off the ground, get them growing up. That's what I need. I mean, this is bare naked back here. I need to get something nice growing up this. So maybe a squash or bottle gourd would do well there. Because you want them to be able to hang and do their whole natural shape rather than when they're touching the ground, they get to be funny other shapes. So make sure that they hang. That's my piece of advice for bottle gourds.
Constance is asking about ladybugs, if purchasing them is a good idea, yes or no?
Ladybugs are great, but ladybugs are, this is where you need the netting. They are hungry when you get them. And what they do is you let them go and their instinct is to fly to find food. They are not going to hunker down on your tomatoes that have aphids on them and start eating your aphids because they're kind of freaked and what they really want to do is fly. So what you do if you're going to buy ladybugs is you put them on whatever it is that has the aphids on it and cover it with the netting or cover it with the row cover or something to keep them in until they get settled down and start eating, and then take the cover off and let them fly around. What I found is that I keep introducing them into my hoop house here. I interchange hoop house, greenhouse. I put them in here and it is too hot in the summer for them here. So the first thing that they do is not eat my aphids. The first thing that they do is get out of Dodge. So that's my story and I'm sticking to it.
Epsom salt. Is it truly beneficial? Do you dilute it?
Epsom salt is not, it is a salt, but it is mostly magnesium, and magnesium is a very important piece of photosynthesis. Very, very, very necessary for photosynthesis. So adding Epsom salts to in not globs of it. It is not it's not a fertilizer. It's a tiniest little bit. I would say, a pinch when you plant a tomato. But here in Pennsylvania, our soils are not magnesium deficient. So we're not dependent on it. But boy, I'll tell you, in the old days when we used to have, this year, we launched the City Gardens contest under a different name today. Today was the first day of the gardening and greening contest, and it is an online contest now. So it's photographs. It's by photos rather than by visits from judge. But what we used to do in the old days was you would take Epsom salts and you would put it with water in a spray bottle and you would spray it all over everything the week before the judges came, and it would just like beef everything to a vivid green color. It would just like make everything greener. That's one of the tricks that I learned for Epsom salts. But other than that, Pennsylvania is not a place where you really need it. But if that's in your background to use Epsom salts, then I'm not going to stop you. Just go judicious, because it is a salt, so it will burn the plants. It will draw water out of the plants if you put too much in it.
All right, so some more questions are, where do you get garbage worms? So I put in the chat, Uncle Jim's Worm Farm, or a friend that's already worm composting, so that you don't even have to spend any money.
Yeah.
But you want to get red wrigglers?
Red wigglers. Yeah, I call them wigglers because it's
just cuter.
Mouth around wrigglers. It's WRIGGLERS, wrigglers. But Anybody will know what you're talking about if you say red wigglers. And those are, you can also use those are bait worms. So you could also get them at a bait shop, but you want to make sure that you've got the kind that really do eat your garbage. You do not want to use night crawlers because they don't deal with your garbage fast enough, and the whole thing will go anaerobic and it will stink like anything.
All right. The other thing was Harlequin beetles. What your suggestions are?
Okay, Harlequin. Those are the. I mean, spotted lanternflies are the new Harlequin scourge. Harlequin bugs are they're in the stink bug family, and they're shaped like a shield, and they are spectacularly beautiful in all of their stages. Their eggs are perfect. They look like somebody stacked 2 rows of beer kegs up, only they're only this big, so really tiny, so smaller than Barbie doll beer kegs. So the eggs are beautiful, the young ones are beautiful, the bugs themselves are beautiful, and what they do is they totally devastate all of your cole crops, anything in the brassica family. So that means your broccoli, cauliflower, collards, cabbage, turnips, rutabagas, radishes. I have had them on my horseradish, same family, all of that family, the mustards, the arugula. Did I miss anybody? And then they get on the darn Swiss chard and the cleome, which are, neither of which are related to the cole crops, but they seem to like they seem to like those outside of I guess those are dessert, you know. They chow down on the cole crops. So what can we do about them? The best thing to do about them is to deal with them before. There's nothing that kills them short of a hammer. I mean, you gotta squish them, and then you get this lovely, and they are a stink bug, so it's not as bad as stink bugs, but they do smell. You need to keep after them when you only have a few, because if you miss them and they get ahead of you, they will overnight devastate your garden. So will netting keep them off? Yes. Will the row cover keep them off? No, they will chew right through that to get your collards and broccoli. We had them so bad in a garden in West Philly that we've had to take a year off from growing anything in those families, so that they go away, because they overwinter. They stay in and I'm really surprised, because I mean, I have perennial mustard here, and there have been years when they overwintered in my lawn in the mustard. Kelly says she remembers Harlequin beetle killer traps around the neighborhood when. I'm wondering where Kelly grew up, because the Harlequin bug is new to us in the last 10, 15 years. So, of course, I could be a whole lot older than Kelly. And I don't know about these killer bags. So Kelly, if you know anything more about that, I would like to know that, because I will put them up in my yard.
The last 2 questions that we haven't gotten to yet are about leeks in the garden.
Leeks in the garden. Okay, leeks are an onion, an allium, and alliums like cool season if you want them to get big and fat. I mean, you can plant any of the alliums, the onions, the leeks, the garlic. You can plant them in the summer, but what you will get is a lot of green and not a lot of fat white part. So with scallions, with onions, with leeks, with chives, with garlic, with any of those, they prefer a cool soil. So they like to be planted very early. In fact, garlic likes to be planted so early that you planted it last year for this year, because it likes to grow in the soil when it's cool. So can you plant leeks now? Yes, but don't expect them to get to be the big fat leeks that you would have gotten if you planted them like a month ago.
And what about cucumber bug control?
Cucumber bug control, again, it's you gotta be proactive. You gotta keep the bugs off the plants. Because as far as I know, the harlequin bug has no natural enemies here. The cucumber beetle may, but I don't know it. They are, the problem with all of these things is once you've got them, if you're going to spray, what you use to spray on them is also going to affect the bees, and you really don't want to affect the bees. So you do your best to be proactive and to prevent the bugs from getting too rambunctious. There is a wonderful product out called Surround, which is a very new thing that is a very old thing. Surround is clay, and you mix it with water and you spray it on the stems of your plants, of your squash, your cucumbers, you spray it on the young plants, and you continue to spray it every week on the stems of the plants. And what it does is it puts a hard coat on them so that the bugs that come can't get, those little flying wasps that lay the eggs for the squash spores, they can't get their little ovipositors through that clay. So you've just effectively put a shield over your plants. And it's the same thing. The cucumber beetles, the problem is not so much that they eat and suck the juices, it's that when they're eating the plant, they're also injecting a virus into them. And we all know how that works. Actually, we don't know how that works, but we know that it does work. And so I'm pointing over there because that's where the squash plants are. Of course, you can't see that. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to keep, for the squash, for the cucumbers, I'm trying to keep this part, I'm trying to keep this shielded so that nobody can eject the cucumber mosaic virus or the wilt virus or any of those, or the baby virus of the baby worm virus into there. Absolutely.
We've got a few more questions. So Matt bubbled up a question about having squash plants surprise volunteer from the compost.
Oh yeah. The fun thing.
But specifically the question is how large and how rooted should you let the plants get before relocating them to a better spot?
The squash that's coming up could be anything. You know how genetics works. So when you buy seeds, the seeds are pretty much guaranteed to be what you asked for. So, but squash are notably free with their trading their genetic material. So pollen from a pumpkin, you could get a pollen from a pumpkin and it could pollinate another the gourds are one family, cucurbits are another family, and then the peepos are another family. But within that family, all of them will exchange genetic material. So the seeds that you get aren't necessarily, I mean, if I planted a nice round pumpkin, if I dumped one in my garbage and those seeds grew, it's not necessarily going to be that same pumpkin that comes up. But if you're willing to take your chances, as soon as it's big enough that it's got 4 leaves on it, don't yank it, dig it out and put it somewhere and see what happens. I mean, I had regular jack-o'-lantern pumpkins come back up. I threw the pumpkin away in my yard, and the things that came out were these warty round things, but they were delicious. So again, dessert, see?
All right, and
lemongrass.
Yeah.
I see a lemongrass. Lemongrass is a perennial, but it's sensitive to the frost. So yeah, lemongrass is something that you're going to bring in for the winter. You're going to bring a piece of it in and then put it back out in the summer. It does not like cold weather, and once it freezes, it's dead. So bring it in. Good bean crops. My favorite bean, there are a couple beans that are really, really good. My favorite is, for a green bean, is Blue Lake. And it's an old variety, But I mean, I remember eating them when I worked, when I was at Penn State and I worked on the farm, and that was the one that we did the research on. And it was a really, really sweet, sweet bean. And it was sweet and crisp even when it got big. So Blue Lake is a good one. Tender Green, Tender Crop, any of the ones with the tender in them. I like the mixes that you get one envelope and it's got 3 different colors in it, but I don't, they're pretty, but they're not as good. The other thing is that I've learned to eat yellow beans because I work full time, and yellow beans are easier to see at dusk when you're trying to pick them. So yellow beans are a good bet. So Cassidy, can you put everybody's mics back on?
Yes.
Okay, and we're gonna have a big goodbye and happy. I'm sure there's some birthdays out there. We should probably yell happy birthday to Millie. So everybody, I love you all. Go out and garden and try new things. Get messy, and we will see you next week.
Thank you, Sam.
Wait.
Bye.
Thank you.